honorees.
Welcome to another edition of Truth and Rhythm. This is the interview show that gets deep in the pocket with contemporary music's foremost masters of the groove. I am your host, Scott Dr. GX Goldfine. If you enjoy this programming, subscribe to the Funk and Stuff channel on YouTube, which is where Truth and Rhythm lives, and be an advocate by spreading the word among fellow funk, jazz, and R&B music lovers. Join Truth and Rhythm's membership program through Patreon. You can also submit a direct donation to the cause anytime at funkandstuff.net. At that site, you can also purchase the book Everything's on the One, The First Guide of Funk. Shop for official Truth and Rhythm and Funk and Stuff merchandise, and use the Amazon links for all of your online purchases, which allocates a percentage to this show. For those of you who go the extra step in supporting the show, you have my heartfelt gratitude for allowing us to continue to shine the light on those special artists whose quest is to find truth in rhythm.
I'm delighted to welcome to the Truth and Rhythm Mothership R&B lead and background vocalist Audrey Wheeler. Having first established herself in the early 1980s as part of a Crown Heights Affair protege act called Unlimited Touch, she also starred on Jeff Lorber's hit Step by Step and went on to shine on hundreds of other popular artists' recordings. Those include Madonna, Chaka Khan, Billy Ocean, Melba Moore, Freddie Jackson, D-Train, Melissa Morgan, Atlantic Star of the System, George Benson, Phyllis Hyman, Stephanie Mills, Lisa, Jennifer Holloway, Regina Belle, Kashif, and her eventual and current husband, Will Downing. A former beauty pageant finalist, she has also released a pair of solo albums, and this September will be among the honorees at the National R&B Music Society's annual Gala Awards. Congratulations, and thank you for joining the show, Audrey.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor. I don't get to do this much, but thank you. Not enough anyway.
Well, it's high time. We're going to set that straight.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
So glad we could connect. And where are you today?
I am home. I'm in New Jersey. Just got back from Toronto, Canada, and sounds far away, but it's actually like an hour and 20-minute flight from New Jersey. So, but it was lovely. Really, it was a private party we did, and it was for Pride Week, so it was just festive, as you can imagine. Yeah.
So you're working with Chaka now, is that right?
Yes, I've been with her over 30 years, which sounds crazy, but it just sounds crazy when you try to pretend to be still young. But it's like, oh, how many years have you been with her? 30 years. They're like, what? So yeah.
Wow, what a fantastic experience! I'm sure she's my all-time favorite. Just so you know, get
amazing.
That out of the way. Yeah,
like a mother figure for us. She's very, very spiritual and very funny. That people don't realize can be intimidating when you see her, but she sees your uncomfortable energy and she's just like, it's okay. So yeah, but she's also doesn't take no mess, as you can imagine. So that's the part everybody knows about and talks about. But really, I've learned so much being around her. And one of the things I want to say is that a lot of times in our careers, people look at you're a background singer, so they think it's a bad thing. And it's like school, because you're standing behind these famous people, watching them just control an audience. And if you have any aspirations to be a solo artist, it's like the best training ground for you, to me anyway. Some people don't, they try to look at it like it's a bad thing, but who would want to come out and have no experience when it comes to performing, speaking to audiences, carrying yourself a certain way. So to me, it can be a stepping stone. So I hope that those who have aspirations for that would think about it that way,
Well, absolutely. And also, it takes special skill to be able to blend and harmonize. It's no joke.
It's actually harder, but that's what people don't realize it. Like there are famous people who a lot of times they sing with themselves on records, like Patty Austin. Patty Austin can blend with everybody, but Chaka does all of her own backgrounds. I mean, there's so many. Marvin Gaye used to do it. Doesn't mean that they couldn't do backgrounds, but it's easier to sing with yourself, obviously. But imagine every job you do, you're meeting new people and you have to try to blend with them. It's not easy at all, but I love it, so I do it.
Yeah, well, obviously you're expert at it because you've done hundreds of recordings, and I think they feel good knowing you're back there helping cover them.
Yeah, it does help. Some of them do turn around and say, "Oh, okay, Audrey's over there." So it makes you feel good to know, especially if you've sung on their record and now you're performing live, and they always look to see who they know over there, like who's over there, and then they say, "Okay, great, I know her and I know him." So it's a positive. It's a career that I've had, so I'm appreciative of it.
Yeah. So Audrey, going back, you're from Jamaica, Queens, right? And gosh, what a hotbed of amazing music, jazz, hip hop, just R&B, everything like that. What was it like for you growing up, and how did you gravitate to music?
So for me, I'm one of 8, and honestly, I had very strict upbringing. So a lot of when I speak to people who in New York who are doing the same thing as me or started with me, a lot of them had the opportunity to go to like music and art in Manhattan. And my parents were like, "You're not getting on the train. You're not going, no, I went to Catholic school for 8 years. So for me, I loved music. I always sang. I found a spot in my house and I would just sing. And my older brother was big on music. So he was the oldest. So he would buy records and I would just listen to Earth, Wind and Fire and Chaka and just listen to different groups. And every chance, whenever he would leave his room or go to work or go to school, I would be in his room fiddling with the stuff and just singing along to it. And what started happening in my family was I would put his headphones on and sing. And I'd have my eyes closed and I'd be trying to, mimic what I was hearing. And I would open my eyes and my whole family would be standing behind me, just like clap. That's how they found out that I could sing. They were like, "What?" So, my parents it was cute to them, but my mother was the practical one and was always like, "Oh, that's so nice. There's so many people who sing." She saw no aspirations, nothing to do with a job. And my dad was one of those follow your dreams type person because he almost made it in the NBA and, stuff like that. So he would later on in life, he kind of pushed me to, if that's what you really want to do. So I went through Catholic school. And then by the time I got to high school, middle school, there was no middle school. Catholic school was 1 through 8. By the time I got to high school, someone recommended me to a teacher that was putting on a play. And I remember I was in the 10th grade and it required me to stay after school. My parents, they had to come to my house, speak to my parents to get permission for me to stay after school to do this. And that's how it started. This teacher just took a liking to me. And well, actually, more than that, apparently he told people that this is going to be my meal ticket out of teaching. I'm going to make this girl. I didn't know that at the time. I was just happy that my parents allowed me to do it. And from there, it just started. By the time I was in the 12th grade, I got chosen to be in Miss Black America, a pageant. And by that time, I had gotten used to singing in front of people. My fears were, kind of not as bad as it was when I first started. And that was definitely a stepping stone for me as far as it was like charm school. They taught you how to do your makeup, how to dress, how to speak. You had to do a little who's important to you, and in politics. So that's how it really started. High school was a big thing for me, and beauty pageants, obviously. So it made quite an impression on me.
What was your song of choice for the pageant?
I did a song that I could not even do again if I wanted to. It was a song by Melba Moore called "Lean on Me." And if you know anything about that song, it's extremely high and you hold this note forever. And at the time I was 17, I could do it. I've gotten the pleasure of singing with Melba. So when I first did a session for her, I was like, oh my, I was freaking out. And she was just like, what is it, baby? I was just like, oh my, you don't know. Because they called me Minnie Wheels in high school because I used to do Minnie Riperton and Lean on Me. That was the song that took people over the top, at that time. So that was, and I loved Natalie Cole. That was my other, I loved her. I did every song she could ever do. And when I got to meet her and sing with her live, it was a big deal. You know, the thing about it to me is, as much as I've done, the day that it becomes old for you, or you're over it, or you still don't get excited, a famous person told me that's the day you need to retire. The day you don't need to do it anymore, or you need to retire. And that's my current boss, Chaka Khan, told me that when I first started working with her. And she's almost like, did I say that? She forgot that she said it, but it stayed with me since 1990s. I remember the day that I'm bored about something, I need to question myself. Like, if you think you can't learn anymore, you know, what are you doing this for? You know?
Yeah. Quick reality and gut check.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, Audrey, what was your first, real break, in terms of either on stage or in a studio?
So I want to say after the beauty pageant, I did not win. I came in first or second. And in the audience, I didn't know it, but at the time, some of the judges was the group, well, 3 members of the group Crown Heights Affair. So as I was leaving, I went to greet my family, people consoling, you should have won. And they came over to me and they said, you got ripped off. You should have won this pageant. Because I was the youngest one in the pageant. These were women, like 24. They had done many pageants, but this was my first. And so to hear that from this group, that my dad and my mother were like, oh my gosh, this is Crown Heights, affair. So they gave my father a card. And again, they came to the house and they told my parents, listen, we have this group. It's Unlimited Touch is the name of the group. It's like a chic sort of group, modeled after chic. They had 2 sisters at the time who were in the group, but they decided this was not for them. So they were starting over when it came to the vocals. And, of course, that's not what I envisioned. When you first start singing, you think I'm going to be Stephanie Mills or I'm going to be whoever was at that time. But at that point, I was just happy. You want me to go around and travel and make money doing? Yes. Sign me up. Yes. So they had to get my parents' permission because I was 18. I think at that time I was 18. And that's how it started. And then the song took off. I Hear Music was a hit. And I was touring from that point on. So my journey, I'd have to say, it's like a dream. It's not like everybody else. This is a different world now, obviously, with social media. People are doing things online. But at that time, you had to be out there, going from show to show to club. It's just different than the way it is now. Everybody's instant stars, in my opinion, anyway.
So yeah, that was 1981, right?
Mm-hmm.
Thereabouts. And, those records, they had, they were aimed at the dance floor, but they had some funk. It wasn't just straight disco,
Mm-mm. Well, the musicians in the band, if you knew anything about Lenny Underwood and Sandy Anderson, they created it and they were totally into funk. They were into a lot of things and dance music, as you said, it was different then. That's when people were roller skating and there were so many clubs. Now it's like, now it seems to be coming back. Like I hear roller skating is coming back, which is so dumb to say coming back, but people are starting to do it again. So for me, I'll be honest with you, I didn't care what type of music I was singing. I was just happy to be singing on it. And Crown Heights also, any productions that they did, like they did Enchantment, I'm singing, I did the demo for France Jolie, she modeled her lead after what I sang. So the Jamaica girls ended up singing backgrounds on Then Roy Morgan, but I did all the demos. I was like their demo queen. So I'm like, they would pay me a couple of dollars, just to come sing this song. I wrote this song. I need you to sing it. So this is all training ground to me, So yeah, it was dance music, but there was obviously the musicians in the band were and still are. They're sidemen for so many people. Our guitar player, Phil Hamilton, he's played with Luther for years, and he's now with Anita Baker. So we all are still working and still actually doing gigs again, believe it or not. We started back up in 2019, which is crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you do any TV appearances with Unlimited Touch or?
We did not, because the thing was that we didn't know. We were limited to down south, like a lot of college towns, New York. We didn't know the reach, and we were on Prelude Records, and our management at the time, he didn't inform us. Like, we had no idea we had fans in Europe. We could have been, that's why it's so weird to us now. We went to France. They had us come, and Scott, they treated us like we were, Luther Vandross. They had a dinner for us and pictures. And I was just like, so we're like, we could have been coming here, performing. We just had no idea that there was this love of our group. So we did not do, when I got with Jeff Lorber, my first TV was American Bandstand. That's the first thing I did. And I did Soul Train later on a duet with someone. But other than that, no, we didn't get to do any of that. Sorry to say, but we did not.
Would you remember first hearing Unlimited Touch on the radio? I'm assuming that's the first time you heard yourself on the radio?
Absolutely. And, I think I was driving, had finally learned to drive, and it's just like, oh my God. And then, never felt like Starr or anything like that, but it was more like just the feeling. It's like, every time it comes on, even now, I have a daughter, not a child. She'd kill me if I said that. But when she hears it, people will say to her, or my husband will say, that's your mom. And she's just like, what? That's you, Mom? So yeah, you still feel it. And on a lot of records that I've sung on that have been, you hear them now. You hear it on TV, on the radio, it doesn't matter. In a commercial, we heard a song that I did with Billy Ocean, and it was part of a Applebee commercial, and people were calling me, you need to call and get residuals, that's you. It's like, okay, cool. So yeah, it's always still a thrill for me. Yeah.
When you became the go-to, secret weapon for the Crown Heights affair guys, what did you learn early on that helped you sort of refine what you were doing in the studio and really become, a pro early on?
So they were very, it's weird. It's little things that most people maybe would not get. But one of the things that they used to say to us when we would get in the studio, if we were doing an up-tempo song, when you're singing, you're trying to focus on, as you said, blending the rhythm, the right words. You're focused on it. So you're kind of like tight, like you're singing and the microphone is there and you're like, and they would always say, move your body. Chronics would always say, y'all are singing like this and you sound just like you're singing. So I need you to, come on, clap your hand, move. You can't clap because it'll affect the singing. But so when I find myself struggling with something or, trying to do the right thing, I tell myself to move or breathe, because a lot of times you're so excited to do the part. And if you're struggling with it, it's more like focus. Make sure you're breathing the correct way. Everyone thinks when you breathe, you're sucking your stomach in, but you're actually not. You're blowing your stomach out like a balloon and it's slowly dissipating. Sounds technical, but those are things that I can never, how to hold out air for long times, because a lot of Crown Heights were horn players, the majority of them. There's other people, but the person who produced us was Ray Reid, and he was a horn player. Bubba, who we call, William Anderson, was the guitar player, but they just gave us the techniques and also introduced me to a lot of musicians who I still work with now. They would have these people come in and play on Francis' record, on Enchantment, on whatever group they was producing. They would have different, and I would meet these people who I didn't know at the time because I was so young. They were veteran performers. And so what happens is they see how good you are in the studio and that you're young. And then they give you a call. Hey, my friend so-and-so wants to use you on his recording. And it just grows. It grows. And from there, it was like Arthur Baker, who did a lot of dance stuff and all the movies, the dance movies and all that stuff that was done. I got recommended to him, Jelly Bean Benitez, Louis Vega. I started meeting all of these DJs. And they started calling me to sing on their sessions. And then it grew into LL Cool J and Russell Simmons Company. They started calling me. I sang on Fat Boys. I sang on LL stuff. I sang on all of that stuff in the earlier days. I didn't care what type of music. It was just, you want me to sing? Cool. I was a little uncomfortable with the rap guys because I was Catholic school girl. And, they were a little intimidating, but they were just as down to earth as anything. But I couldn't believe it was a pinch myself moment. Like, oh my God, I'm singing with, at the time rap was still new, but it's still, I was just like, and you're paying me for this. I would call my mother, I had 4 sessions today, oh my God, I made this much money, and so it was a thrill, that's where it started for me. It's word of mouth in this industry.
And all the beauty pageant stuff got you prepped, I guess. So on stage, you were pretty comfortable, for performing.
I've always been known. Anyone who, if they're watching and they went to high school with me, they will laugh because I was always the makeup girl. Always, even in the plays that I did in high school, whoever was acting, I was in Guys and Dolls. I was in Wendy and Peter Pan, and whoever had to kiss me would always be like, oh God, she wears all this makeup and I don't want to. So it just, and then the pageant just enhanced it. First time I ever saw myself, fully glammed up, I was just like, I just knew I wanted to learn how to do it. So it just grew. Everything, in my opinion, was a stepping stone. I didn't know it at the time. So whenever I would complain, my mother, oh, I'm so tired. I had so many sessions today. She would say, Audrey, you know how many people would die to be in your feet, in your shoes? They would love to be your friends who you went to school with, who are working at McDonald's. Not that there's anything wrong with working at McDonald's, but, who want to do this. This is their dream too. And they, it didn't happen for them. So that was another humbling. My mother was such a, God rest her soul, she was amazing in terms of, she was my best friend, the bottom line. So she would tell me, she would not slap you on the hand, but just be like, hey, look, stop complaining. I'd be like, okay, Mom. And I remember all of these things when I feel myself feeling like, oh God, I have to get on a plane. I'd catch myself like, you better, especially after the pandemic. Oh, that was crazy. Because, the music industry we didn't get any love, in my opinion. We were devastated by work. Everything was on Zoom like this.
It sounds like you had a good balance though between your mom and your dad, with him being the kind of dreamer and her being the practical voice.
She was a nurse. She was a nurse. My dad was a sky cap for United. So, like you said, he had aspirations he played ball in the Army, and he was really good. And he almost made it into. And I have twin brothers. I'm not a twin. They're twins. One of them almost made it to Charlotte Hornets. So it was a good balance of practical and, don't let anyone destroy your dreams, so that was the beauty of it. I can look at it now, but at the time, I just felt like my mom was a hater, like, you sure you don't want to get a job? And I actually had to in the beginning when things slowed down. And if you never kind of establish yourself, my mother and father were like, hey, until you're making all this, money, you need to put some money on the dresser for like the rest of your brothers and sisters. So I became a makeup artist. I worked in Macy's in Manhattan, 34th Street. And that was my little supplemental job until the big break came. And the big break was Unlimited Touch. I had to go out on faith. Like, oh, I'm doing this every day, 9 to 5. And now we have a small tour to go down south and do all these colleges. So it's like, ooh, my mother and father, you sure you're going to leave your job at Macy's? Because sometimes with those type of jobs, they give you only a certain amount of days. After that, they just like, we have to replace you because you keep leaving or going away and you're not available. So it's a lot. There's a lot that goes with this world. It sounds very glamorous, but when you have children, things change. So it's a career you have to love. I will say that. You better love it.
Yeah, the Limited Touch, you mentioned the chic sort of model.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, I also compared and thought of it similar to some of the Solar Records acts too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've met some of them and I heard that. And I also heard Atlantic Starr at the time when Atlantic Starr came out. I've become really good friends with Sharon and the group and most of the musicians. And at that time, they started comparing us. And, and Tume, I loved Tuapa's voice. So, yeah. So for me, these were all models. You know what I mean? But you're right. I think physically, the way we looked was 2 girls with 4 guys in the back. So
like a dynasty kind of thing. Yeah. So why did it end up at just being 2 records? What happened?
Well, there was an issue with management, if I'm honest. as I said, the guys in the group wrote most of the material, but the credit was being taken from them, sort of. And I'm not going to say whom because we've gotten past it. But they started finding out, like us finding out that we had this fan base in Europe. We never knew, that. And then as we started doing other, working with other people, you start to learn, well, I should have got this, or I should have got residuals, or we never got paid for this, that, and like one of the guys two of the guys in the band, the song that Faith did, they basically took I Hear Music and it's the background music. And, they later on received a whole bunch of money because they wrote the songs. And so it was really a situation of music, of management and us. And so 3 of the members were like, I'm out. He doesn't want to pay us this. We're not this. They left. And me, Sandy, and Stephanie decided to do one more record. And then eventually same thing was happening, same management. And after that, we kind of dissipated. We always stayed in touch, always called each other for different sessions. And, birthdays, we always called each other, but everybody just started growing at a certain pace. Our drummer was more into, Latino and jazz. Lenny's played for everyone as well. Phil, Sandy was doing more funk because Sandy was the bass player. And he was just this funk bass player and was doing a lot of rap stuff. So we all just kind of, Stephanie and I we toured with Linda Ronstadt. We've done Freddie Jackson together, so we all kind of went our own way, but always stayed in touch because we were kids. So we always, even now when we get around each other to rehearse, me and Stephanie are grown women and we fall right into this silly, giggly, it's just dumb. It's like, I don't really have it with anyone else, but we just start laughing at funny stuff or silly stuff to us. But we've come such a long way, but it's refreshing to be young like that, again.
It sounds like Unlimited Touch was sort of like your university for music,
It was, we say it was school. It's certain, when we look back on stuff that went down, we always laugh and say, who knew this? Who knew that this, we remember when they would do clap tracks and they would have these big boards and, people don't know, maybe they do know by now, but instead of us really being in the room, we would clap, but they would have these big wood planks and you would sit there and go, they would have us do it because, your hands would start hurting after a while. Now they have it's all programmed. There's no real live claps in records anymore. So, yeah. So all of that stuff was that, and also tracking where you initially, when I first started singing, you would sing 4 tracks of vocals. You would sing all 4 tracks. Now they get 1 or 2 good takes. You might double it and they fly it, quote unquote, all over the track. That was not around when we were there for hours doing an entire dance. Think about a dance track. Like Stephanie and I are the background singers on Funky Sensation. That's like another kind of big record that it's a sound. Once people found out that we were singing on Funky Sensation, that's when everyone came out and they were like, who are those girls? We want that sound on our record. So that was a huge record, to this day. Like when we do a show now, we add all the songs that we are singing on. I'm singing on Dying to Be Dancing. All the stuff that Crown Heights produced, pretty much I'm doing. So a lot of them, French Jolie, and she had like a French accent, but she was trying to emulate what I sang on the demo. So when I hear it on the radio, some songs I'm not really singing background songs. Like I did the demo for Gonna Get All Here. I did the demo, but they hired the Jamaica girls to do it. But when I hear it, I think, oh, I'm singing on that, but I'm actually not. I just did the demo and I lived with the song before it became a hit. So, but yeah, there's that. When I look back at all that I've done, I'm still amazed. Like people remind me, you sang on this. I sang on Mickey Howard's first record. I did the whole album with her, just her, me, and the producer. So when you look back and then the record blows up, you just don't know. You don't know what's going to be a hit. And there's those songs that you sing on that you guys never get to hear. It just didn't click or didn't blow up into a big hit. But, like an example, I don't know if there's a song that I did with a guy named Omar Chandler. It was a duet of This Must Be Heaven. And yeah, and it was a remake of This Must Be Heaven. It was a session. I was there doing backgrounds and I was ready to leave. And Omar was like, because I've known him since he was a kid. And he was like, no, I want you to do the girl part. And I was like, what? So I did it and it blew up because he was known as the guy from, what's the rap song? It takes two to make a thing, whatever song that is. He was the voice of that. And so he got a record deal from that and he wanted to do This Must Be Heaven. And that is the first time I did Soul Train, believe it or not, with him and a showtime at the Apollo.
What year was that about?
Oh, I don't know. It had to be 93, 92, I'm thinking in there, anywhere from in there. But yeah, it was like a one hit, but they loved him. He was that guy from that record. So, and he sadly passed away a couple of years, well, not more than a couple, in a very tragic way. But the point is, that was one of those sessions that you don't expect. This is just a session. I'm getting paid for it. I don't think I'm going to hear this on the radio. You do that a lot because you don't know what new genres are going to be. You just don't know. And all music sounds great at the time, but you don't know what radio or the people are going to like. So You're just hired.
Audrey, who do you see early on, say like in the early 80s, perform that just really kind of impressed you and you said, I want to emulate what she's doing on stage or what she's doing on record?
So I really was a fan of Melba Moore. If I'm honest, I clearly was copying her records and I saw her on like the telethons. They would do, that was an opportunity to see R&B acts really, because it wasn't a lot of, Soul Train obviously, but a lot of times Soul Train was not real singing. They were lip syncing. So, but I loved Earth, Wind & Fire. I really was a fan of, like I said, Natalie Cole. So they were, their careers, especially Natalie. I loved what Melba did live, but Natalie's trajectory as an artist was how I envisioned how everyone in high school thought I was going to, they were, oh, you're going to be Natalie Cole. And so I sang all of her stuff. I got so sick of singing Mr. Melody, but people would say, from high school, I want you to sing on my wedding. You're going to sing at my wedding. It's like, okay. But yeah, those were artists that were Earth, Wind & Fire, Melba Moore, and Natalie Cole, I would have to say, were big time records for me. Yeah.
And you got to see Natalie in concert?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Everybody knew I loved her. So I got to go. My first concert was Earth, Wind & Fire. It was at the Nassau Coliseum in New York City or Long Island. And that was my first. I saw them and it was just like, me and my sisters, and then the Jackson 5, obviously. My dad worked at Madison Square Garden, so he got all his girls. It was just 5 of us. And he snuck us in. We had no seats. We just sat every time we sat in someone's seat, they would come, we'd have to move, but we were just like, Jackson 5, because there was 5 guys, there was 5 girls in our family. So we would all say, I'm going to marry him. Michael was my husband at the time, so these were all things that based on showmanship that it's a dream in your head. And like I said, I had a mother that was, oh baby, come on, you got to have a backup. That's a dream. There's a lot of talented people out there. My mother was just practical, so
Sure.
Yeah, it helped in terms of me being blessed for what I do. I know I have a blessed life for sure. Yeah.
How did you make the Lorber connection?
So, once again, I was hired to sing backgrounds on Jeff Lorber's album through The System. Mike Murphy in The System was producing it. And I hadn't worked with Mike a lot. I think this might have been my second session. So one producer, I can remember, and this is not a name dropping thing, but I can remember singing on Freddie Jackson on Jam Tonight, big song, sang on it. Kashif calls the producer, which was Paul Lawrence, and says, I need those girls. Whoever you got singing on that, I want those girls. So when he told him our names, he was just like, oh, well, I used them already. I know Audrey, I know Cindy Mizell, I know that. He was just like, I know them. How'd you get them to sound like that? And he's just like, hey man, that's my secret to, you do what you do with them. And the same thing happened with Barry Eastman. So a lot of them talk to each other. They would be like, who'd you get that sound with? So it's definitely word of mouth. Well, it was back then. I don't know how it works now. And so with Jeff Lorber, I sang on the record. I did not know that at the time Jeff had auditioned a lot of singers to sing the lead. I was just strictly, hey, we need you to do a whole album. And the whole album, all you're saying is, wow, I'm getting to work with this well-known producer and he's paying me per song. I'm in. So after we finished singing, they stopped me and they said, hey, we auditioned. All of my friends had tried out for it, but Jeff didn't like their voices or said, nah, not the right sound. And he asked me, did I want to try to learn this? I want to audition. I was like, okay, and I sang it, never thinking anything of it. Sang it, went home. I think they called me and said, Jeff loves your voice and Clive Davis loves your voice. So are you willing to? And I'm just going, what? Because I knew all the people who had tried out and their named background singers, artists that you would know if I dropped names, but they had already tried. And I'm like, he liked my voice over, you're always like, huh? So did it, perfected it, fixed it, did it perfectly. And that was my first real tour of the country, was with Jeff Lorber. And I also did American Bandstand with him. And yeah, so that was my first everything as far as by myself. My parents, my mother at that point, I'm older now, and I was in my 20s but still young. And I had really primarily been focused on background in the studio. I never toured really. So that was my first, and Jeff went to some really different places than R&B acts go to, if you know what I mean. I did like Catalina Island, places I probably would never have even heard of. We did Portland, Maine, Boston. I had never been to these places, honestly. So that was my first tour. Aside from, Limited Touch was more local.
Yeah, because he brought some of that legacy jazz stuff with him. Right. And that I think is still his biggest. I think that was his biggest hit ever.
Yeah. Well, he did have one after me with, oh God, I'm getting her name. Superwoman.
Karen White.
Yeah, she came after me. She was after, but she had a bigger career than me after solo. That was a stepping stone for her as well. It was, I forgot what it was called, but Step by Step was a bigger song. I will say that. Jeff let me, after the tour was over, Jeff was like, hey, if you want to go around New York City and do track dates with it. And I was like, and I did. They would call me and I was making money off of, appearing, doing Step by Step, and I would do the song and, make money. And that was a beautiful thing that Jeff let me do that, did restrict me.
How did it feel sort of transitioning to, being a lead presence on stage, doing a song like that, as opposed to being in the background?
It was, at that point, it was more like, oh my gosh, my dreams are coming. You know what I mean? It was more almost like, this is the perfect step. It's going from me singing, and I did not care about singing backgrounds. I love singing backgrounds because it is an art. Like you said, it's a challenge for me. If you present Latin music to me, if you present R&B, pop, it's a challenge to be able to, you'd like to think that you can do it all. So you don't ever want to say, hey, I'm doing this. I've sung in different languages. You never want to say, I can't do that. You want to challenge yourself. So for me, the challenge of doing the background brought its own, joy to me. But to now have that's when I really heard my voice on the radio again after Unlimited Touch, and just was just like, that's me. Oh my gosh, And, roller skating was big then. So it was a big roller skating song as well. And touring with Jeff was different because it was different than what I had been doing because he gave me percussions. So I was, playing I've never played in my life, but he gave me some sticks and a tambourine and shakers. And I would do that on the numbers where I wasn't singing, where he was doing fusion stuff. And even now, Jeff, I haven't seen Jeff in years, but he's running to my husband. I was like, tell Audrey, he's asked for my number on Messenger. It's just weird because, this is someone that when I first met him, I was just like, you're a legend. And, now you can kind of consider them friends because when we did American Bandstand, Gerald Albright was actually the bass player. And I didn't even know he played saxophone. I found out like years later. I always knew him as a bass player, and people were like, "What? He's an incredible sax player." It's like, oops, you know. So I still get that excitement. I still find out things about my industry, and I would love for there to be a vehicle or a way to, I don't know if it's seminars or just to teach. The industry has changed so much, so I don't know if what I would have to offer would be considered old. But I just think there's so many steps that are being stepped over nowadays. Everybody wants to jump from singing in their house to I'm a star. And yeah, not so much, because it's a lot of artists now that if you hear them live, they don't sound like the record. And there's a reason. So much is being done in the studio that it's like, what about really singing? How about the part, you know? So yeah, it was just a different energy touring with a jazz artist, if I'm honest. It was great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so did that success sort of parlay or set the path for you to be able to get the solo deal?
Actually, my solo deal came about. It's another weird story. My solo deal came about because I was touring with Freddie Jackson. And Freddie Jackson's a very generous, very, doesn't have any, wants to give shine to his side people. And Chaka Khan is very much like that too. So he would break down the music and say, "You want to hear my girls?" And it was just like, we're like, what? So he was out, I want you to hear my singers. And, at that time, you're just like, I'm going for it. It can feel somewhat competitive, but it was just like, he's giving me a chance to sing, I'm going to sing. And Freddie Jackson was on Capitol Records. And in every city we went to, there was a rep, there in Charlotte, they're in Jacksonville, New York. So they all started talking about me, like, this girl is doing a solo, she's killing it. And the next thing I know, I'm getting an offer for a deal on Capitol. I'm like, what? I can't even begin to tell you, the shock. And I think I actually made my mother really proud because, I did it in spite of, if you know what I mean. It's like, it's not going against your mom, but I proved myself to her. And I've always had that. I have a daughter just like it. She's in theater. She sings a beautiful voice. But she never wants help from me and my husband, which is strange. Believe it or not, rarely does she want help. So I get it. You want to be able to say, look what I did on my own. Look what I did, mommy. So I get it. But yes, that's how I got a solo deal on Capitol Records. That is how it happened, believe it or not. And then that's when I did other TV shows. I had done stuff for Capitol for promotions, and I was more comfortable at that point. Still, you're always questioning yourself, because one of the questions that they would always ask is, what makes you, as a solo artist, what makes you stand out over Mariah Carey? They would always ask you that. And it's just like, that's not what I'm not trying to stand out. I'm bringing my coloring, my style, to a record. Hopefully people love it. It's never about knocking anyone out. Well, for me, it wasn't, knocking someone out the box. It's just, you just hope people like your voice. So, but they would always ask in the interviews on BET. It was just like, I don't have an answer. I don't know why you should choose me over. I just hope you like this song. So that's what I would always say. I hope you enjoy the song. So
now that record had Preston Glass on there, who's been on the show, and also Lionel Job, who worked with Starpoint, and I just had them on.
He was my man. And it's funny, I don't know if you know, he just passed as well. Mm-hmm. He literally just passed days ago. I was talking to his daughter, and I did not know. Someone told me. So yes, Lionel was extremely knowledgeable about the industry, and I went with him because of Starpoint. Sorry, people always do that. Yeah, I loved Starpoint. That was another group that I really loved, and so because he was managing them, I was like, okay, I'm gonna trust this guy, and he took me to the music conventions, the BRE, all the stuff. I don't even know if that happens anymore, but I got to go to these conventions when he would promote me as his artist, or promote me. You would go to the Capitol suite. You're an artist on Capitol. Let the reps meet you. So yeah, it was a learning experience in the 90s, throughout the whole 80s, 90s. It was a learning experience, totally. Yeah.
How'd you feel about that first record? And do you have any particular memories about it?
I will say I was somewhat intimidated by Preston because I had to leave the tour with Freddie and have a sub do the tour. And I flew out to San Francisco, and he's to this day, I'm so cool with them. I love them. His wife especially. They made me feel so at home. My parents even came out to hang out, and my mother was just like, like now she's like, I get it. This is a big deal. I knew that he had worked with Narada Michael Walden, so I was just like, this guy's right for me. Are you kidding me? So it was very, the good thing was that they removed me from New York and they took me out to San Francisco and we did it there. And when we mixed, I think we mixed in New York. It was an honor. I mean, just to sing with this guy who was so sweet. He's the sweetest. I'm sure you've interviewed him. He's a lovely man. Preston has got a calm, cool manner. And his wife and their daughter made me feel like home. They took me out. I didn't feel like I was there all by myself as a woman, but they treated me like family. So that was a great experience.
And how'd you feel about how the finished product came out and the reception and that kind of thing?
I loved it. I don't know that. I remember the first single was Irresistible, and I'm not sure. They did a video and everything. I was like, I didn't know how that was going to stand out. There were ballads on there that I love ballads. That's the school I come from. So it was a little fear, of how it would be perceived and how people would. And I remember Tawaka from Entombed, I had done BET and she called me, I didn't know her well. I think I had done a few sessions with her, but I was still like intimidated. And she was like, girl, I'm so proud of you. I saw you on BET today and it's so good to see someone representing, and I was just like, oh, thank you. So there was pride, when it didn't blow up as big as I would like. There was obviously, from what I was told, there was a lot of shifting at Capitol, and the person who was my A&R person got fired, and whoever took on, and it happens so much, whoever took on the roster just decided, hey, I'm not feeling her. So they just dropped me. And I was fortunate enough that I had never stopped doing backgrounds, because that's what a lot of us do. You're busy, or you think, I don't want to say the wrong thing, but you believe the hype. I'm about to blow up. I'm about to be. And when it doesn't happen, now you have to start. Well, not start, but if you let your ego get out of control, people are not going to hold a spot for you. And, other singers are not going to say, oh, come, welcome back. It's, or if you act a certain way to producers and you haven't been being like available to them, why would they call you back? So it's like little etiquette things that you should. I don't know that everyone has done that, but that's what you want to do. You want to make sure that you're thinking the right way. What if? And that, in my opinion, that is where my mother comes into play. And I don't want to get emotional thinking about her, but because of her saying, come on now, don't get too big for your britches, I think that I was smart, that I still kept doing, like someone would say, oh, I know you got a record out, so you probably won't sing on. I'm like, are you kidding me? Yeah, I'll sing on your record. So thank God I still did that, and I gotta credit my mother for that.
I was gonna say you're smart about it, clearly, and you were a pro,
But didn't realize I was being smart. I was just, I want to say fear, I'm sure played into it, of what if this doesn't, I had success with Unlimited Touch and then Step by Step. So what if this doesn't, so it was just trying to be smart. Then I lucked up and I got another deal on Naraja's label. That was another opportunity that ear candy. I wasn't expecting. I just kept doing my job, singing with artists, whoever, would call me and would pay me my rate. I was just like, sure, I'm available. I started doing jingles in New York City. So it just kept growing in different ways that I couldn't have imagined.
Wasn't Melba on Capitol also?
Yes, she was.
Yeah, I thought so.
So it was like, and they were all part of this management team, Hush Productions. So they had an inroads. Freddie, I think Najee was on, and I sang on Najee's albums, and I toured with Najee. That's another artist that believed in my solo voice. Najee took me out after Freddie, and I toured with him, and that was the jazz, world. And it was different because you're usually the only girl, and you sang, I used to close the show with him, and that was another positive moment for me where someone loved my voice outside of a group setting, singing backgrounds. So that was another stepping stone for me with Najee. And I grew up with Najee. That's another thing. The whole Jamaica Queens thing. Najee knew me when I was a little girl with pigtails. He would always introduce me on stage, which was so weird. Because I knew this little girl when she was a little girl with pigtails, and everyone told me she could sing, and you got to watch out for her. And I met so many people from the Jamaica, I worked with so many of them, not knowing they were legends at the time. Tom Brown, I sang in Tom Brown's basement, and all I remember was his cheeks would blow up. And I didn't know he was this famous until Jamaica Funk came out. And then it's like, hey, that's that guy. I met Marcus Miller outside of a park. Someone introduced me to Marcus and said, this little girl can sing. So all of these, my whole career has been about stepping stones, if I'm honest,
What was Nile Rodgers like? How did you first encounter him?
So I had done a session for him, and I didn't know he was starting a label on BMG, I think it was, BMG, I think it was. But when I say, I guess God has truly blessed me, and I know I'm blessed, it was definitely a situation of me singing and me being like, I'm never looking for it. I'm not pursuing a deal. And I came to do a session for him at his studio. He had a studio in the 50th Street. And they said, Nile wants to talk to you. And I was like, okay. And I came into the office, and he was just like, hey, I'm starting a label, and I think you'd be a great artist to be my first, female artist. And I was like, now remember, this is not the first time I've had a deal. So, now you're like, is this the one? Is this the one that's gonna? And, I took a chance on it. I feel like I had more input into the music than I did before. I remember that I loved this song by People Bryson, Can You Stop the Rain? And I was the one that said, I want to do that. I want to do a remake of that song. And I recently worked with People, and whenever we talk, I'm always like, how do you feel about the fact that I did your song over? He's, oh, you sang beautifully. So it always seems to come full circle in some way, having worked with all these people. Yeah.
And that record, you got Najee on there, and also Timmy Allen played some bass, great bass player.
Yep. One of my friends. Yeah. And D-Train, my husband, who was not my husband at the time. Yeah, I got them. I love D-Train. That's a whole nother, if you've never interviewed him.
Oh, he's been on. Yeah.
He's hilarious. He's the funniest.
He's so demonstrative. And I actually had a bunch of, we talked a long time, and I had a bunch of extra that I couldn't use, but it was just so much fun talking to him.
Let me tell you, him and my husband went to high school together, and they went to Erasmus in Brooklyn. And D-Train, if people don't know, was a football player. And they called him D-Train because he would knock people down like a train. But on the side, he was this incredible singer. And my husband was approached to be in D-Train. But my husband had more of an R&B jazz sensibility. And when it didn't work out with him, he suggested D-Train to Hubert Eves. And the rest is history. So, whenever you would do a D-Train session, Hubert was an amazing talent because he played with M2 So again, producers are the legends for me. And, D has become like him and Willer. When he comes to our home to record, we know maybe 2 hours of it is just going to be silliness because him and my husband are going to go into their whole high school, all the stuff they used to say and do, because D's into karate. I know maybe he told you that, but he's super into karate. And he had all these silly sayings, and he still just says them to this day. And as soon as we think about D, we just smile because that is the funniest, most fun guy to be around.
There's much more to this great Truth and Rhythm interview. Just continue on to the next part of the episode. Also, be sure to subscribe to this channel. If you've already done so, please share it with friends. And become a member by joining Truth and Rhythm on Patreon, or consider donating at funkinstuff.net. Thank you very much.